I really started to embrace the idea of just authenticity and vulnerability. Like I've made so many connections because of that, because I'm just real and raw. And, I want people to see me who I am and see the light of Christ. The thought that just struck me so forcefully was these people need to hear the message of hope. These people need to hear the message of Christ. They need to hear Christ saves, Christ helps, Christ heals, Christ gives us peace. He'll take those burdens. When you see me cry, it's not because I'm sad anymore. It's not because I feel guilt anymore. It's just because the conversation is hurtful. And so I live my life intentionally with the idea that every single one of those things are for my good, whether it's a bad experience, a good experience. It's rather than shrinking from them, I embrace them and welcome them because I know at the end of it, I'll be better because of them.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about personal transformation and second chances. Today's guest is someone whose story and message deeply touched me. I serve as a volunteer clergy member at our local jail, where we have the privilege of working one-on-one with inmates to help them discover hope, healing, and the belief that no matter what mistakes they've made, their past does not have to define their future. Recently, I attended a district conference with other volunteers and several former inmates who have completely turned their lives around. It was there that I had the privilege of hearing Tony Taylor speak and sing. His story is powerful and inspiring, and I immediately thought, more people need to hear this. So, Tony, I am so grateful that you accepted the invitation to join with me today.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's an honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to be a part of what you have going on here.
Thank you. And you are a living example of personal transformation and of not letting your past continue to create the future. And you've recently emerged from after nearly 29 years in the belly of the beast. But we're going to go back in time a little bit. Is it okay if you tell us a little bit about your childhood? Where did you come from?
For sure. First of all, we just give glory to God for, the transformation that you spoke of and how my life has turned out today. So back in 1969, I was born, 56 years, almost 57 years ago. I'll be 57 in July. I was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, but I lived in a much smaller town called Cullen. If you blinked, as you passed it, you'd miss it. That's how small it was. And my mom, she's Native American and my father's African American. And because my mom was Native, she might as well have been white, in that time. We're talking about I was born in 69, so the early 70s. And it was a struggle for her. And in addition, a struggle for me because I was identified with her. And at that time, the racial tensions in our country were pretty intense. And so, there was a lot of bullying. There was a lot of, wanting to fit in, but I just couldn't because they wouldn't accept me. And, I really, really struggled with identity because of that. One of the things that happened to me at about the age of 7, I started to endure sexual abuse from some older neighbor guys, My mom didn't know about it. My dad didn't know about it. No one knew about it. So when my mom just all of a sudden one night told me to pack up my things because we were leaving, it came as a shock. And I was leaving with this tremendous, burden upon me because, that was some trauma that I didn't share with anybody. And as I've learned today, that you need to speak about the things that trouble us the most, because if you don't, they can definitely be incapacitating. We ended up in Hutchinson, Kansas. I was like 8 years old. And I was extremely upset with my mother for leaving, taking me away from my father, even though he wasn't the best example, even though, he did some bad things, that I got to witness. And, my mom was just completely abused, like physically, psychologically, emotionally, in every way. He had a whole nother family while we were still there.
Oh,
And I know my
man.
mom knew about it because the kids knew about it. They told me about it and took me to see my brothers and sisters. And obviously I denied it because I didn't know no better. And so that was something that my mother had to carry. At the same time, I loved my dad, right? And I missed him. And I wasn't the best kid at that time. My mother, um, she lived on a reservation when she was born. She's native. She was born in Canada. And her parents died in a fire when she was just a little girl.
Whoa.
And then, yeah, and then her family members, her mom my grandma had like 8, 9 brothers and sisters. So she was being cared for by the family. Well, evidently she was being sexually abused. And my father was actually married to my mom's aunt. Okay.
Wait,
And
what?
they crossed the border to get my mom and then brought her back across to the United States and never took her back. They said they were going to the drive-in and then they kept her here. Well, my great aunt ended up leaving and left my mom behind. So my mom had been through a lot of trauma herself as a young girl growing up. And so she was what we would call arrestedly developed. So she wasn't prepared to be a mother to me at all. Like she didn't have that type of, instruction. She wasn't shown how to properly do this. And so she didn't know how to handle me. She just let me go. I lived in the streets basically. I came and go. I'm 8, 9 years old and I'm in the streets. So the guy that she left with to go to Kansas got tired of me. I think. I mean, I just assumed this because I was a hellion. He put us on a bus to go to my mom's reservation. So we get all the way to Bangor, Maine. My mom not trying to go back to the reservation. So she said she ran out of money. I knew it wasn't the truth because I was taking $20 bills out of her purse to play video games, which I had never seen before. Video games and pinball machine, right? And so we end up staying there. I meet a family that were also mixed, Black and Greek. They asked us to move to Vegas. Well, in the meantime, before that, I end up with having a PCP overdose because what I didn't tell you was my father was a drug dealer. I seen marijuana. I smoked marijuana as a boy. And when we left, I'm smoking marijuana with total strangers, like whoever I could find. I'm 8, 9 years old. Of course, I'm not going to buy it. I ain't got no money. So I try to find it and searching for the people that I could hang out with and smoke weed. Well, I always hang out with older people. And so I was hanging out with these boys. We were playing pinball at the biggest mall in Bangor. We was on our way home, walking home, and we stopped at the 7-Eleven, and this lady asked us if we want to smoke some weed. And I said, yes. We go outside the store, we smoke it, and it was laced with PCP. So that's how I ended up having a PCP overdose at the age of 10.
Whoa.
Well, yeah. So when we moved to Las Vegas, my mom, 2 weeks within our arrival, just up and leaves, just takes off. No warning, no nothing. She just leaves. So, I mean, I don't know about any other children, but I was pretty devastated at the age of 11, about to be 12. And in addition to that, I was being sexually abused once again by the boys of this family. But what I didn't know until years and years and years later, this is after I've been married, after, I'm grown, I'm 20 some years old. I find out that the reason why my mom left was because she was being raped as well. And she thought that I would be safe. She didn't know what was happening to me and wanted to go get herself together and then come back to get me because that's exactly what she did. She came back to get me about a year later. And it was like one of the happiest days of my life because this family was getting ready to move back to Rhode Island. And we were like a couple of weeks away from moving. So, and I did not want to go with them, right? Not dealing with what I was dealing with. So anyway, my mom gets me and I'm about 12, about to turn 13 now. And I have this love-hate relationship with her at that point because I'm just completely, angry and bitter and resentful and all the different negative emotions you can go through because she left me. But I love her dearly because she's my mom.
Absolutely.
So at that point, I start, using harder drugs. I start using acid and mushrooms and, I'll try anything and everything, right? And so the man that she came back with, he worked. His name was John. He worked as a broiler cook in one of the in one of the hotels. And whenever they got paid in this is Las Vegas now. You get paid in the casino, you can go gamble. So he would
Right.
go gamble and lose his whole paychecks, or he would win $2,000, $3,000, and he would not stop unless he got to that level. I think he probably had a cutoff point. If I don't make 3,000, then I'm just playing until I do, and he would lose his whole paycheck. So we would go move, no groceries in the house. We move into a nice place, no groceries in the house. We got to move, and so I finally, after about 3, 4 times of that, I move out. I leave home at 14 years old. I find what I think is a safe place to go. I ended up graduating from high school still. But I went to school whenever I wanted to go to school. I mean, I was drinking. I was probably alcoholic by the age of 15. Just the cope. Those were my coping skills: getting high, smoking, using drugs, um, alcohol. Then it became sex. Then it became gambling. Anything and everything to distract me from dealing with the pain, the trauma, what had taken place in my early years, right? And so I graduated from high school. By the grace of God, I do really well in school because school's always been easy for me. That was the one thing my dad gave me of all the things that he could have given me. And that was he taught me math at a very, very early age. Like 5 years old, I could do multi-digit multiplication and multi-digit division. So when I got to schools, the flashcards was nothing. Like I always had my hand up. They'd be like, let someone else answer, Tony. You don't have to answer every time. I'm like, okay, and I'll hand right back up again. So school was easy for me because math was so easy. Everything else became, writing skills, English, everything was easy. And so I graduated with like a 3.7. I go to Dixie to play football, and then that's where I met my ex-wife, and I ended up here in Utah. I got in trouble again, went out to the prison for 90-day evaluation. They let me out. I did probation for like 5 years. And yeah, my wife and I had a son. His name is Dijon. Yeah, and so that's how I ended up in Utah. And, and then later on, I made the worst decision I ever could make in my life. I took a life and, I affected many, many lives. I couldn't even imagine how far reaching it was. But it was during that initial time in jail that, I found the source of strength to help me endure and overcome the rest of the adversities in my life I'll have to face, because they don't stop. They're one after another.
That's very true. Oh my goodness. And before we move on too much, I just want to go back a little bit. Have you ever heard of adverse childhood experiences, ACE? Have you ever heard of that term before?
Absolutely. Adverse childhood experiences, yes. Through
Right.
school, I have a bachelor's. I'm almost done with a master's degree right now, and so of course in studies I read about that particular theory or whatever you want to call it, right?
Right. Right.
And I didn't go into it, but I understood what they were presenting, right? I knew that it was something that could describe what I went through, what I've
Yes,
gone through. Yeah,
absolutely. And
definitely.
you have dealt with trauma after trauma after trauma. So many things. And I'm sorry. It wasn't fair and it wasn't right. And those things affect us deeply and profoundly. It doesn't excuse our choices, but it certainly can help us explain and understand how we could come to a place like that. And it's so normal and natural to turn to anything to help numb the pain, to avoid, to distract us. And what a normal and natural thing it is to turn to alcohol, to turn to drugs, because they're pretty effective at numbing. And yet they don't solve the problem, do they?
No, not at all. Just buries it for a moment, numbs you so you don't feel it, but eventually you got to face it again.
Right. And then you get to face that on top of all of the other things. So I am amazed that you were able to graduate from high school and be able to go to college and to be able to play football and to do some things that are normal and that look like they're successful. And I'm grateful that you were able to get married and to have a child and to be able to experience some good things. And I'm sorry that after that, it turned south. Do you want to go into that at all, or should we just kind of just skim over it, or how do you feel?
I mean, if you would like for me to talk about it, I will tell you. I mean, it's 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 so difficult to negotiate that part of my life because some of the things I didn't talk about was all the times that I was drunk driving, the times I was in a vehicle that was in a collision, waking up in the hospital, having that PCP overdose could have left me a vegetable. All of these things, my life was preserved, only for me to turn around and take a life at some point later on in my life. So um, to negotiate that and accept that is really difficult. And it wasn't until I read in Isaiah where God is talking to the prophet and telling him to tell, the nation of Israel that, their thoughts are not his thoughts, that his ways are not their ways, and they're not to question, just to follow. And, that as much as that's still difficult to, accept intellectually, emotionally, I know that he loves me. And then we can go to the New Testament where he says all things work for the good of those that love, in Romans 8:28. So I put all these pieces together and it's helped me. But the bottom line is that there was a lot of guilt. There was a lot of shame. There was a lot of emotion, and humiliation. I felt terrible that not only a life was lost and taken by me, my hands having blood guilt on them, but there was also the aftermath of that, the family of my victim and what they had to endure and go through, the emotional hardships and turmoil and, all of the negative things that I talked about. I felt, bitterness and anger and resentment and hate and revenge and then my own family, who I later learned by my attorney were also victims, and the loss that they had with me being, out of their lives now and having to serve the time. And so that was a lot to deal with early on, a lot, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, because I mean, quite frankly, that's where my spirituality began, is when I was arrested. And in no way, shape, or form can I ever deny that God was in the details of that particular moment in my life. It helped me to grow faith, exponentially in a very, very short period of time. And that was the impetus of me being able to survive 29 years in the belly of the beast, wanting to, be prepared when they opened the doors, because I knew they would. Even though the people around me didn't believe that, I knew that they would open those doors for me. And I wanted to be as prepared as I possibly could, and I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed that source.
And I'm so grateful that there is a source. When we make a mistake, some things we can fix. Like if I spill something, I can clean it up.
Yeah.
But there are some things where we make a mistake, we can't undo the damage. We can't fix it. And that can lead to such feelings of hopelessness, despair, guilt, shame. And I'm so grateful that you turn to God, because He is the only one who can fix our mistakes.
Yeah, I definitely experienced his unconditional love, no doubt. His protection, the hedge of protection that he placed around me during those years. I can't emphasize how difficult it is to pursue personal development in prison. How hard it is to stay focused. Um, I used to say the negativity within that environment is so thick so pervasive you could cut it with a knife. But I know that as long as I stayed faithful, as long as I trusted, there would be no doubt that I could do it. Um, and that's because of, like I told you, the early experiences. They just kept my faith growing and growing and growing because one thing after another, all of those experiences just, culminate into, a faith that is unshakable. And I think that's how he helps us to mature in our spirituality, in our relationship with him, and our trust in Christ and what he's done for us already, and gives us that ability to understand and accept that we can't do it ourselves, but because of him, it can be done. It's already done.
That's fantastic. You know, when you talked about how the negativity in prison is so thick you can cut it with a knife,
Mm-hmm.
it is a different experience to be inside the belly of the beast and to be outside. Some things, at least for the people that we visit with, some things are easier there. For example, if I'm struggling with addiction, there
Mm-hmm.
isn't as much accessibility to the drugs, to the alcohol. And we have some of our people who are doing so well. And then when they get out, they go
Mm-hmm.
right back into the patterns that they were in before.
Right.
And here it's a different world. And here you're trying to do something, improving yourself, that personal development. I want to be a different person when I leave than I was when I came in.
Right.
You weren't just trying to skim the surface. You weren't just trying to get through the day to day. You were trying to change. And in that environment, it was not easier than it is on the outside. It was harder on the inside than it would be on the outside as you're trying to navigate this negativity because
Mm-hmm.
not everyone there, in fact, very few people there, have the same goal that you do of trying
Right.
to improve and trying to change. I would love to hear what you did to be able to keep that fire, that faith going.
Well, I think at the beginning, um, guilt could be a tremendous, motivator. Like, I knew based on the reason why I was in prison that I needed to change. Like, that's where it starts. There has to be identification of a need. And then it became, how was I going to make that happen? What was I going to do to make that happen? So one of the first things that I did was I enrolled in school. I wanted to, um, continue to work on my secondary education because I started at Dixie. I said that already, and so I had a little bit, but I didn't do well then. And now I got lots of time to work on school, right? So that's where I started. I enrolled in school. Well, at that time, I told myself that I would continue to educate myself to the day I left, right? And I've done that. Like I said, I'm like a month away from finishing my master's. If it takes me that long, I got to write 4 essays and do a 100-question test, and I'm done. Um, but during the years, it was always, the motivation, the factors of motivation, and one of them was my babies. Like, I needed that. I needed to change for them. Like, I didn't want to have that be my legacy, coming to prison for a crime of murder. I did not want that to be my legacy. So, um, if there was ever a motivator, that was one. And another thing was, I think I owe that to the family of the victims because that's one of the things they asked me during my sentencing. They asked me to do good things with the rest of my life. So uh, that was my motivation, you know. And as I've spoken already, the strength and, the perseverance and all of those other characteristics that allow you to overcome the things that could be detrimental to what you're trying to do, the progress that I was trying to make, because it is a progress. I mean, it's a process. The progress is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to work and you have to work and you have to work some more. And it doesn't stop. I mean, it's going on right now, even though I'm out.
Yes, absolutely. And that continuation. And thank you for sharing the things that you did. Um, and change requires doing. doing things, and you immediately began with education. This is something I can do with the time that I have. This is something that is available to me.
Yeah.
I loved and appreciated you talking about guilt as a motivator. And I'm sure you're probably familiar with Brene Brown, where she
Oh,
talks
for
about the
sure.
difference between guilt and
And,
shame.
and shame, absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
How
And
guilt
remorse.
is I did something bad, and shame is I am
Like M's. Yeah,
bad.
right.
And if I am bad, there's nothing I can do about it.
Hmm.
And it leads to hopelessness and despair, where guilt, I did something bad. Oh, that can be excruciatingly painful. And yet, I can do something about it.
Hmm.
Now I can use the rest of my time to do good.
So when I first got I was in Gunnison, and I first got there, like the first week I was in life skill classes, and eventually when at some point, 10 years later, I don't even think it took that long. At first I was a tutor. I started helping people learn math and English, eighth grade level. And then I got to the prison at Draper, and I started teaching life skill classes. And I always stayed in those life skill classes because I felt like it was an opportunity to gather these tools that could help me, you know, in my self development, my personal development, right? And the one thing that struck me was, why didn't I teach these in school? Like like
Right.
my babies ain't learning this, so I felt obligated to learn as much as I could so that I could share it with them when I get out. Um, but I think that um, if more people would just take advantage of those things in prison, the recidivism rate would definitely drop. I mean, I know for a fact that it drops when you educate yourself. But those life skill classes can do the same because they teach you you know how to have a different response to the challenges that we have. Like for the most part, most of us, is me included, we turn to negative things to help us cope rather than the positive things that are available to us. And that was one thing that I learned during I was in a place called Conquest. It was a inpatient therapy, and that's where I was exposed to Brene Brown. I had a wonderful therapist that was the one of the first books she gave me was it was I think it was before Daring Greatly, the one that I read first. But then I
Okay.
read Daring Greatly after that, which was still about shame and guilt, right? But anyway, when I was there is when I realized that the things that we're learning can help others, right? I'm talking about in this environment that we were in because it was all life skills. We actually had to come up with things to teach, right? They were called seminars and self development. And one was 20 minutes, the other one was 40 minutes, and we had to come up with the curriculum, what we were going to be teaching. We had to submit it, and then get up in front of the classes and teach this. And I think that those things for the men that were involved in the program could have been something that could absolutely help them, like you said, when they get out, don't go back to where they were, right?
Right.
Uh, Especially the coping skills that we learned there, during our therapy, group therapy and one-on-one therapy. Um, anyway, I just
Yeah.
got hooked up with more therapy. I'm doing therapy. I'm going to start next week, actually. I start on Tuesday. I have a
Good.
therapist, and I'm looking forward to that. We're going to work on the trauma that I experienced, and yeah, she's excited, and I'm excited because I haven't done it since I left the prison. Like I go to the county jails and kind of like kept saying I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, but I never did until like the 2 weeks before I left. I had finally met with a therapist, right, and I felt so good afterwards, and I'm like, man, I've been missing something. Pretty cool.
Right. But using the resources that are available can make a really big difference. I
No doubt.
loved what you talked about having the life skill classes and how
Mm.
that's not taught in school. In school, we learn about reading, writing, math, history, things like that, but we
Mhm.
don't learn those life skills because we assume that we learn those at home.
Yeah,
But
right.
not every home is teaching a good set of life skills. I think every home is teaching a set of life skills,
Right. Right.
survival, how to
Hmm.
cope. but they're not healthy.
Right.
So maybe that's something that would be a good idea to add to the school so that we can have a little more even footing. Just,
Yeah.
I don't know, what, however we're raised at home, that's our baseline. That's what
Mhm.
normal looks like. And then from there, we can learn other ways of doing things. And it's like, huh, that way works
Mhm.
better.
I had an idea when you were speaking of thinking, like the thought that just struck me so, forcefully was, and these people need to hear the message of hope. These people need to
Absolutely.
hear Christ. They need to hear Christ saves, Christ helps, Christ heals, Christ gives us peace. He'll take those burdens. Um, when you see me cry, it's not because I'm sad anymore. It's not because I feel guilt anymore. It's just because they're hurt. The conversation's hurtful,
Right.
and I'm just a little bit more sensitive than I used to be. And so,
And that's actually a good thing because
yeah,
it means you are allowing yourself to feel the feelings rather
yeah,
than that immediately shields up,
yeah,
not going there. So
right,
it is uh, it is a strength and it is a sign of courage, even though society doesn't see it that way.
right. That's Brene Brown written all over it.
She's a pretty smart cookie, you know?
Oh, yes, she is. Yes, she is. That's where I really start to embrace the idea of just authenticity and vulnerability. Like I've made so many connections because of that, because I'm just real and raw, and I want people to see me who I am, and see the light of Christ. And to do
Right,
that, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be authentic, and He will absolutely shine brightly. The need to have, a foundation in your life of, Christ, of our Heavenly Father, Jehovah, um, to me, and I'm speaking only for myself, that is what helps me deal with the trials, the adversity, the challenges, um, because I know at the end of those, I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to develop more character. I'm going to have nothing but positive that results from those things, right?
right.
Um, that's what I've learned. That's what I believe. And that's what I expect. And so I live my life intentionally with the idea that every single one of those things are for my good. Whether it's a bad experience, a good experience, the challenges are the challenges. And it's rather than shrinking from them, I embrace them and welcome them because I know at the end of it, I'll be better because of them.
Yes. And I loved what you said. You said, I hear I'm speaking for myself.
Right.
And that's matters because we can't heal anyone else. And yet the
No.
process that you mentioned and the sources of turning to God is universal, but only when it becomes personal. When he is
Yes.
not the savior, he is my savior. He's not just the redeemer, he is my redeemer. And it's not until we make it personal that it can change us, not just the person sitting next to us, the guy across the street, but us until we allow it inside. That's so beautiful. One of the things that you mentioned when I got to listen to you at the conference a little while ago that touched me is you said, I have lived a fulfilled life. That was so beautiful because it wasn't just that life was taken away from you because you were in prison. It was, this is where I was. This is what I did. This is the person I am becoming and have become. And I am fulfilled.
Yeah. And that is because, the relationship that I have, you said something that I always tell people, and that is, I don't identify with any denomination of Christianity. I just have a real personal relationship with God through Christ and only through Christ. And then you talked about me saying a fulfilling life. Well, that fulfilling life is because I've made so many connections that I didn't have in my life before I went to prison. I didn't even have a connection with my own wife, with my own child, with my mother, with anyone. I was so disconnected from life. Yeah, there's so much to be joyful for. There's so much hope And it's because of these connections. If you scroll through my text messages, I mean, it's so many people that I'm connected with that love me, that want to spend time with me. They want to take me to lunch. They want to go to dinner. They want to do this. They want to do that. They're asking me how my life is going. You know, they're happy to hear from me because they haven't heard from me in so long. And those things, you know, provide meaning and purpose in my life. And that's what I meant by having a fulfilling life, even in the
I'm
belly.
so glad. And I'm grateful that you have connections and people that love you, because that makes a big difference.
No doubt. No doubt. No doubt. And you know, the first one is, as we've been talking about, is with God through Christ. That is the most important one of all. And from that one, it all just trickles down, and they're so uplifting and provide motivation and inspiration. Like the volunteers that I've met have inspired me in such a way that there's no doubt in my life that I'm going to be of service to other people in my life because of them, right? What they showed me, the example that they set. And, you know, to me, it was God loving me through them and showing me how my life could be even more fulfilling.
Absolutely. And God does work with us through other people and makes those connections through people. So I'm grateful that people were there for you.
Yeah. You and me both.
So I'm proud of you for who you have decided to become.
Mm.
And I appreciate your example, and I appreciate you sharing with me today. Is there anything else you'd like to make sure that we cover before we close today?
Well, no, I'm just appreciative, very much appreciative of your willingness to have me on, and your desire to reach out to me like you did. And, you know, I just think that there needs to be more people like you and the people that I've met in prison that are, you know, have this ability to accept no matter what. Like, it doesn't matter what we've done in our past. Um, you're an example of God's unconditional love. And I really and truly appreciate that because it's helped me in my growth and development. It's helped me to picture myself doing the same thing and being intentional to actually do that.
Thank you. In closing, I'd like to share a quote, an anecdote from Clinton Duffy, an American prison warden known for successfully rehabilitating prisoners. One critic mocked him, saying, "You should know that leopards don't change their spots." Duffy responded, "You should know I don't work with leopards. I work with men, and men change every day." Today, I invite our listeners to know and believe that we do have the power to change our lives for the better. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for tuning in to Linda's Corner podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends to help us inspire even more listeners. Be sure to visit hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free and affordable resources to help you overcome life's challenges. And explore healingbreathworkdetox.com, where you'll find transformative tools for deep inner healing and lasting change. Also, don't forget to check out my books, Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. Your journey to hope, healing, and happiness starts here.